Did you guys?
Yeah, there we go. Welcome, everyone. This is the California Acceleration Project second webinar this fall. This one's focused on grading for growth in STEM calculus with active learning. Today, we have faculty from Hartnell College and from CSU Monterey Bay. We are recording, and this event will be posted in a couple of days on the CAP website under events, where you'll also find other resources connected to this presentation. So without further, I guess I should talk about the Q&A. We do have a chat that's open today, but we're not going to be monitoring that for questions. We are using the Q&A function. So if you notice at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a Q&A. When you enter a question, it will appear when someone starts to answer it. Some questions will be answered in writing, others will be answered out loud as we give the questions to the presenters. All right, without further ado, let's get started.
All right, thank you, Myra. Hello and welcome to Grading for Growth with Active Learning. So this workshop is based on work that was done collaboratively with Cal State Monterey Bay and Hartnell College and supported by a grant from the California Education and Learning Lab. And I thought we'd start with introductions. So we'll just go in alphabetical order. Leti, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Leti Contreras, and I teach mathematics at Hartnell College.
I'm Allison Lynch, and I teach math at Cal State Monterey Bay.
And I'm Jennifer Morehouse, and I teach math at Hartnell College.
And I am Senorina Vasquez, and I also teach math at Hartnell College.
All right, advance the slide. So the goals that we have for you in this workshop are, first of all, that you gain an understanding of how active learning supports equitable outcomes for students and fits within the grading framework that we'll present. Second, that you feel confident that you can adapt this grading system for yourself in a way that aligns with your values. Third, we want you to understand how grading systems can affect the student-teacher relationship and can either reinforce or break trust. And finally, we'll set you on the path to create your own standards-based grading system by first having you write one standard. We'll only have time for one, I believe, for an upcoming class, then write an assessment for that standard. And finally, think about how you'll fit the standards-based grading into your grading schema. So we're going to start with a short activity, and I will pass it to my colleague, Leti.
Okay, so in the next slide, which well, here, you can, for the next 45 seconds, just take some time without writing anything down. Just read over the words. Try to spend about the same amount of time in all of them. You'll be asked to write them down in the next slide. Okay, so next slide. So, if you could please take some time to write down in a piece of paper all the words that you remember. Doesn't matter what list they were in or if they had a blank or not, just write down as much as you can remember. We'll give you about a minute, actually, yeah, a minute or so. Anybody need more time? Okay, I think it's been a minute. Let's go ahead and have you, next slide, please, Nina. Okay, so now take a look at the list, take a look at the words that you wrote down and classify them by writing down how many of the pairs of words that you wrote came from column A, and then how many came from column B, right? They were not in the same order before, but just take a look at them and write down how many. All right, so get ready to scan. Take your phones out, please. And then count how many words of the ones that you remembered came from column A. And then count how many came from column B. I'm wondering if you got more in column A or more in column B. So that's what the scanning is going to be for. We're going to gather this result and then tell you why we're doing this. Okay, so go ahead and take out your phone, please, so that you can scan these. Nina, you can tell when they're coming in. Oh yeah, we can.
Can you see them? Yeah, I'm sharing the
Yeah.
screen.
Mm-hmm.
I've got 11 responders so far.
Mm-hmm.
There's 23 of us here, so I'm hoping maybe a few more.
Yeah, I didn't take it.
No, that's
So,
okay. Yeah,
yeah,
so there's
I-
still 23 minus 4 would be 19. So maybe 18, maybe 15 would be good.
Okay.
We've got
Are we
11
waiting?
though.
Are we waiting for anybody else?
We can go on. This is 11 results.
Okay, so before we move on, there's something very obvious going on in this chart. Anybody want to just state the obvious? Unmute and say it. Why do people keep remembering more words from column B? Can you take us back to the previous column? I mean, the previous line,
There were-
Nina?
The ones in column B had letters missing, and so your brain had to work harder to figure them out. So they remember them more.
Ah, did you notice that? Can you take us back really fast? Let's see.
Let me go back.
Uh-huh.
Trying to go back. Trying to go back. There it is.
Yeah, right here. Okay, so see, column B was the one that was missing the letters, right?
Mhm.
And for some reason, that those were the ones that we remember the most, right? Okay, so yeah, and this word came from the book called The Talent Code, and he and the author calls this deep practice, but it's basically what's going on. Okay, take us back to where we were. Thank you, Nina. Yeah, so studies have shown that on average, according to the book, people remember 3 times as many pairs in column B, the one with the missing letters. But again, why? And I think I believe it was Mark who spoke up, right? The ones that they were missing. But why is that? Anybody want to guess as to why the one that was missing letters we tend to remember more?
Maybe
You had to
Mark
make a
wants to.
connection.
Okay.
What is it?
You had to make a connection. So your brain has to think more and has to make
Yeah.
a connection to figure out the word first.
Mhm,
And so you're
mhm.
making more connections, and that allows your brain to hold on to it for longer.
Exactly,
least.
exactly. Yeah, you for a fraction of a moment, you stopped longer there than in the other words. Next slide, Nina. So when you saw those words with the blanks, exactly, you had to stop. Again, even for a tiny bit, you stumbled, right? Until you figured it out. And because you didn't move on until you figured it out, that's what's going to make it more likely for you to remember, right? So again, in the book, it's called deep practice, but that's basically what I want our students to be able to do, right? Not give up when they're struggling. So and we, at Hartnell College, we're serving a population we're serving a community with at least 85% students identify as Latinx. So we're heavily invested in pairing both equitable teaching practices with equitable assessment practices. So when we started our standards-based grading at Hartnell, we started it together with active learning. So that's why I wanted to make sure that you knew and you understood where the students were, where we're coming from. And we showed this to the students as well the first day so that they can get motivated, and yeah, they can't believe it. It's just, they don't think, it's not something that we think about every day, or that we, enter into a conversation. Next slide, Nina. So what is the struggle? What is struggling and growing stronger look like for us at Hartnell? And in our class, yeah, that's okay. Yeah. So I just wanted to emphasize the fact that that compared to traditional lecture classes alone, using active learning approaches has been shown to increase student performance and decrease failure rates, particularly for students from underrepresented and excluded communities. So we were definitely invested in doing this work even before the grant was awarded to us. So in our classes, this is what it looks like. Before they come to class, we ask them to do a preview activity. When they come to class, as needed, we'll do mini lectures. And we're using the book called Active Calculus by Matt. I'm not gonna say the name correctly. Help me out.
Vulcans.
Thank you. And anybody else using that book? I'm wondering, as a supplement or as a main one. Okay, so I don't think I saw anybody say yes. But so anyways, we use that book as our foundation, and during class, we do our mini lectures, community building activities. Since day one, they'll be in teams when they're doing their investigations. I'll be walking around checking for understanding as well. I'll send students out to check for understandings, and then also students will present their answers on the board. Usually, I'll give them a choice whether they want to stand up there and like present it, or if they're short, I'll just have them go to the board and write something down and then go back and sit down. That way, whoever mistakes they were, it doesn't matter. And I tell them, like, mistakes make the best conversation. So hopefully there's at least one mistake up there, so we can have some fun discussing it. Otherwise it'll be a little boring. And of course, during class, we also do our assessments. Our assessments are mostly written assessments, but we have also used interview assessments in here and some group assessments. And then after class, they'll practice more using them. We found that my open math course that ties to the active calculus curriculum. And we really like it because it gives the student, not only is it free, but it gives the students the instant feedback that they need to know and to learn from their mistakes. And they get multiple attempts. And of course, some of them do come with built-in video, so they even get the help they need. And because they just made a mistake, their brain is like primed to receive that information, much more so than if I just assigned a video without them making a mistake. So that's why I feel like making the mistakes, active learning, like we couldn't really separate them. But that's not the only way to do it. This is Hartnell's flavor, and I know Allison is gonna show us how they run their courses as well. And then let's see. Oh, one thing that I wanted to point out is that usually the green. Notice what's happening here. Everything in the green is basically active. Students are active and versus just being passively taking information in. So which is, like the opposite of what a traditional classroom usually has students doing. Next slide, Lina, please. So we have in ours 25 learning standards. 2 of them were prerequisites, 20 were calculus, STEM calculus content. And then we also included 3 success in STEM that cover soft skills. These standards encompass all the skills that we believe are important for our students to take from our course. So they form the basis of our grading system. Next, Nina. So again, active learning is hard, right? So we need to create a safe space for our students to be able to be vulnerable, to make mistakes, to ask for help. But students don't do optional, especially when they're bombarded with a lot of things that are not optional. So we need to assign value to those soft skills, because we do think that they are important. So we're literally competing for time with for our students' time. So there's not only are they dealing with the math content, but also like navigating Canvas, the coursework, everything, like dropping classes, student services. There's just a lot, right? So if we can make our classroom, give them the tools, give them the team in the safe space where they can, minimize those stressors, so the calculus can happen, right? The challenge, so that the only challenge left, the only struggle left, hopefully, is the calculus in the classroom at least. Next, Nina. And so the 2 main things that we incorporate to create our classrooms to be safe spaces for our students to be vulnerable is, since the first day, we start with icebreakers. So and we set the class norms, and usually we'll have the students set the norms themselves, because they're going to come up with things that you would have picked out for yourself anyways, and better. So that and then as the students work on those team investigations, we have to be aware of group dynamics, because it is, they are people, they are students, they don't know how to work with groups all the time. So assigning them roles is one strategy that sometimes we use, or just even, I emphasize the whole, like, being aware of, like, stepping in as necessary, or stepping out, like just being aware of that, so that we give space to everybody in there. And again, when you assign roles, one of the roles could be the monitor, checking in on other students. And the importance of a productive struggle is huge, because our students may come from trauma from all their past experiences, where they experienced struggling in math and making mistakes, and they didn't see that as being productive. So we do have to kind of reteach them this, like the importance of slowing down, struggle, make the mistake, learn from the mistake, and then just try again, right? And and make sure that they understand that in order for them to actually grow, they're going to have to be learning at that edge of their capabilities. Otherwise, they're not actually growing. And the last one, there's no shortcuts, right? Learning just takes a long time to explain, a long time to understand, a long time to eventually master. So practice at home is going to be obviously essential. There is no shortcuts for that. Next slide, please, Nina. The three success in STEM soft skills that we chose are these ones right here. Utilizing resources effectively. So we do check-ins with them, so that they can come and see how they're doing with their grade. We talk about time management, lots of discussions for the reflection and metacognition one. And I wanted to save time and remove the effective failure, but Jennifer didn't let me. So Jennifer,
I wouldn't.
please.
We argued about this, and we've argued about it before, and I feel like effective failure is a really important thing for students to learn. And so I'm really adamant that needs to be one of the things that we assign value to. And so I feel like in this, we're in this environment where they're struggling and they're making mistakes, and we need to celebrate failure, right?
It's true. Thank you. She could excel it better. And when the first day of classes, I asked my students to write down a couple of struggles that they think that may keep them from sitting in their class, and the most top 3 were procrastination, time management, and I'm not good at math. So and that's not unique to my students. So through the reflection and metacognition, I believe that we can take care of that stuff. You know, the self-care, the microaggressions, the imposter syndrome, and Nina Vasquez, you know, was one of, you know, she created a lot of the stuff for even prior work, right? So we've been building on from, you know, prior projects and adding it onto our standards-based grading. Okay, next, I pass on to Jennifer.
No, to me.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you, Nina.
Yes, thank you. So we just heard about active learning for equitable outcomes. So now we're going to turn to grading for equitable outcomes. So the question we can ask ourselves first is, does our grading match our values? And what is the purpose of grades anyway? So we want you to pull out your phones one more time and type one word or a phrase about your answer to this question. So please do so now. Okay, to measure learning for mastery level, ranking students, measure learning, preparedness, measure of understanding, measuring mastery for feedback. Okay, grades are for feedback. Measure understanding, provide feedback on progress, preparedness, to assess growth. See a couple more coming in, so I'm going to wait. Okay, feedback. It's required. Okay, it's a requirement. Yeah, that is true. It's required. Yes. Okay. So the three biggest is, you know, I see it's for feedback, to measure understanding, and to measure learning. Thank you for participating in that. It will stay live in case you want to continue to type. But let's take a look now and look at a brief history on assessment and grading practices. So the purpose of grades has evolved over the years. In the 1600s, when Harvard was first established, there was actually no grading system. Instead, they used exit interviews to award degrees. Then in 1832, Yale started to use a 4-point scale to rank students, but they chose not to disclose that to students to avoid unhealthy competition. But then along came women. In 1898, they were invited to higher education at Mount Holyoke. And guess what happened? The modern grading system was born. It was born to rank and to sort, and ultimately it created some barriers. So then in 1994, another controversial publication infiltrated education, the bell curve. It made an appearance and it was embraced by many of us in higher education. However, that same year, psychologist Richard Herrnstein and political scientist Charles Murray argued that human intelligence is heavily influenced by social and environmental factors. And as such, cognitive science does not support the application of the bell curve to learning. They argued that the bell curve simply reflected pre-existing inequities in society. So what did this praxis of these hundreds of years accomplish? You know, even though we were informed of this in 1994, even though we might have known the history of grading and systems, you know, the bell curve had already made its presence into higher education, and the grade point averages made their presence into grading practices. And so what resulted from the student perspective was a broken trust. There was we broke the trust, right? We broke their trust in our assessment practices. So now students were hoping that whoever set the curve did poorly, right? They were hoping for people to do poorly. So we must ask ourselves, is our current approach or process reinforcing this broken trust model, or are we creating a sense of belonging and a thirst for learning? Trust and equity go hand in hand. And so we want to ask the question, how can we foster trust? Because that in turn will foster equity. And do our policies convey that we truly believe every single one of our students can learn? Is the language we choose to use non-punitive and mindful of student fears? Do we provide opportunities for effective failure without punishment? Do our policies value growth and learning? Do we come across as a partner in their academic journey? Do our assessments foster trust in us and in our institutions? Do our assessments measure learning, like you mentioned in the word cloud? Do our assessments inform us if a student understands a concept? Right? Do our assessments help to move students towards that learning, towards that competence, towards that idea we have that grading is supposed to serve? And do our assessments offer hope? Those are the questions we need to ask ourselves. We believe that standards-based grading does offer hope, and all of those other mentions that we mentioned. In fact, we might even say that our approach to grading is culturally responsive. According to the National Institute for Learning Outcomes and Assessments, we believe it is culturally responsive because we begin by carefully selecting our student learning outcomes, and then we employ assessments and grading that are mindful of student differences. This is a checklist that was published by the National Institute for Learning Outcomes and Assessments. And this is what they consider to be equity-minded and culturally responsive. And as you will see, the items that I highlighted in blue, these are the items that we believe are met by standards-based grading. And those that I did not highlight are things that we accomplish when we talk to other instructors about standards-based grading. When we modify, when we talk to our students and inform our future semesters changes by this. So standards-based grading is checking off all of those boxes for us. And then I also want us to remember what British economist Charles Goodhart once said back in 1975. In an article on monetary policy, he criticized Thatcher's government for trying to conduct monetary policy. He said, when a metric becomes the objective, it ceases to be a good metric. So let's think about that. Have our grades become the focus for our students? Have they become the objective? Let's think about that. And on that note, I now defer to Professor Morehouse to continue leading us on our journey today.
All right, so I just want to repeat that. When a metric becomes an objective, it ceases to be a good metric. In other words, when scores and grades are the objective, they lose their value for measuring student understanding. Remember that Yale hid their rankings from students. Why? Why did they do that? They wanted to prevent exactly the things that we're seeing now. Students are hacking the system. They're memorizing an algorithm rather than actually learning the process. They're using calculators or computer software to bypass doing the hard work. They're just mimicking what the teacher does in the classroom, and they're shortcutting the learning process And that comes at the expense of deeper learning. So how do we invert that paradigm? Next slide. Well, we don't fix the problem by sticking with our traditional approach because that's the way I've always done it. And so why do I need to change? So I want you to think about the following scenario involving 3 students. So notice that student A came in strong with 95% on their first exam, 80 on the second, and then 65 on the third. So it really fell off. Student B earned 80 across the board, and student C got off to a slow start with a 65% on the first exam, and they worked their way up to finally earning a 95% on the last exam. But despite having very different profiles, these students all earned exactly the same final grade of 80% for a B in the class. So I want you to consider, which student do you think learned the most during the course? And get out your phones again, because we're going to have another poll. Next slide. All right, so which student learned the most? That was fast. 9 participants, 10. We'll give
Let
it
me
a
know
few
if
more
you want me to
seconds.
go back to the previous slide.
Maybe, yeah, go back to the previous slide really quickly.
Okay, let's see if I can do that. Yes, I can. I can. There it is.
There it is. In case you forgot what the scenarios look like. Hopefully you have the QR code already queued up and ready to go. Just a little reminder. All right. So which student learned the most? And it's unanimous. And I will say that in every talk, every time I've presented these scenarios, it is pretty much unanimous. Almost everybody agrees that student C learned the most. In fact, almost every talk I've given, it's been unanimous that student C learned the most. So why are we not acknowledging the learning that's being done by that student with a better grade? It's not enough to say, oh, those are just the numbers, the percentages worked out that way. That student did not have a chance to recover from that early low score. And that will always be true in a points-based system where scores are averaged over the entire semester. That's why we need a new system. And the system that we propose is standards-based grading. So we're going to talk now about what is standards-based grading exactly. Next slide. So standards-based grading is essentially an assessment and feedback loop resting on 4 pillars. Pillar 1 is a clearly defined set of standards. Pillar 2, helpful feedback. 3, marks that indicate progress. 4, reassessments with no penalties. And we're going to dig down into that a little bit more. So let's advance to the next slide. So there are a lot of different flavors and varieties of standards-based grading. Everybody kind of puts their own spin on it, but they all have some core things in common. There's a set of clearly defined standards. You can think course objectives, learning outcomes for your course. You already have those, right? They're in the course outline. They need to cover everything that you think is important for the student to learn in that course. And we think they should be framed in positive language with I can statements. I can do this, I can do that. The assessments in the class then only focus on those standards, nothing else. That's why your standards need to be complete, because you're not going to write assessments that assess other things other than the standards. And students know going into any assessment exactly which standards are going to be assessed. There's no guesswork about it. Next, the instructor feedback focuses not on the grade or the percentage, but on helping the student improve their knowledge of the standards. But unlike in a traditional grading system, students will actually read your feedback and they'll use it to improve their skills and understanding because of the next bullet point. The system allows students to reattempt any standard multiple times. So they're invested in taking that feedback and going forward with it, right? They're going to use that feedback to improve on the next assessment. The number of times that you assess can be variable. I prefer to limit it only by the time constraints of the semester and of my schedule and the student schedule. Usually though, I would say at least 2 reassessments for a student because not everybody gets it even the second time. Sometimes they need a third try at it. And then students are not penalized for making mistakes. So I tell students all the time, learning this standard, whatever it is more important to me than when you learn it. I don't care when you learn it, I just want you to learn it by the end of the semester. So they know that I care about their learning. They know that I want them to learn the material, and that's more important to me than their grade. The grades, though, indicate progress towards meeting the standard. So they're not averaging in earlier attempts. It's either did you meet the standard or did you not meet the standard, right? So it's not, oh, you got a 50% the first time and then you got 100% the next time, so your average is 75. No, it's you got it, so you got it. All right, next slide. So now we're going to talk specifically about the implementation of standards-based grading at Hartnell, and we'll start with our grading schema. And I'll just say that, again, I said there are lots of different flavors. This is our flavor. You could have a slightly different flavor. And CSUMB has a slightly different flavor, right? We, even with it in Hartnell, we all do things a little bit differently because we don't have a coordinated course system. So we all kind of put our own spin on it. So what I'm presenting is really an amalgamation of the Hartnell classes. Yeah, so our grading schema is about as simple as it gets. I guess you could eliminate that second bullet point and make it a little bit simpler, but I think it's important to include that one. So the first outcome would be met, right? They get a check mark that they showed proficiency with that standard. There were little or no mistakes, and we're holding, notice here that we're holding students to high expectations because we believe that 100% of them are capable of learning. So going back to that equity rubric, right, the equity language, we believe in the students and we're telling them that, and we're holding them to those high standards. The almost designation means the student showed competency and understanding, but they made some minor mistakes. So we're allowing room for those mistakes, but we're still holding the student accountable because we're going to have them correct that assessment. And then they move up, they level up to get a met on that outcome. We want them to get into the habit of correcting their mistakes so that, you know, if you're at a job, I tell students all the time, if you're at a job and your boss gives you something back and said you have some mistakes on it, you don't just go like, oh, okay, I made some mistakes and then walk away. No, you fix your mistakes and then you give it back to them. So we're trying to get them into that habit of correcting mistakes, but we're avoiding any punitive or demeaning language. And then the final one is not met. And actually, I usually call this not yet. This requires a reassessment on the standard. There are significant problems, major mistakes. They just haven't made progress on that standard. And we want them to go back, relearn the standard, review it, and then reassess. And again, we're allowing room for students to make mistakes, we're allowing room for growth, and we're demonstrating that we believe 100% of them can learn that standard. All right, next slide. So we said the first pillar of the system, sorry, I think I have a typo in my notes. So at Hartnell, yeah, sorry. First pillar of the system is the standards. So at Hartnell, we call them the learning targets. There are 22 for us content learning targets. Those 22 content learning targets for calculus, they go all the way from the most basic of I can find an average rate of change to I can integrate and find a volume of a surface of revolution, right? So it covers everything in between. And then we also have those 3 success in STEM habits that we discussed earlier. During the course, we work through those learning targets in a scaffolded series of steps. So the first step is a very low stakes activity. They complete a preview activity from the textbook, and they do that by watching a video and taking notes on the activity and uploading their notes. Those activities set the stage for the learning that we're going to do in class. And then the second step is a medium stakes. It's an online quiz in MyOpen Math, which is a free online system. The students must earn 80% to pass the quiz. And that sounds like kind of a high bar, but they have many reattempts. So they get 2 reattempts per problem, and then they can reattempt the entire quiz over again 4 times, and I usually give them more times if they need it, but I want them to feel like it's a scarce resource so that they really put all their effort into it and don't just kind of, throw spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks. And then the last step is a high stakes in-class timed assessment. These are traditional exams or quizzes, and sometimes some of us have started implementing an interview-based assessments, which I won't go into because we have so many other things to cover today. I will also say that the medium stakes, the quizzes, I really think of those as a camouflaged homework system. If they need more practice on those topics, they don't hit that 80% mark, they're going to go back and they're going to redo it and they're going to get more practice. But I'm not just throwing, 30 homework problems at them and expecting them to do all that busy work. They're only reassessing if they need extra practice. Okay, so now we've told you about our system, so it's time for you to start developing your own system, and I will pass it on to Ollie.
Thanks, Jennifer. So yeah, hopefully at this point you're thinking, okay, this all sounds great. I'd really like to try this out. How do I get started? And perhaps you're kind of worried, is this going to be a lot of work? Well, it doesn't have to be. Next slide. So it doesn't have to be everything everywhere all at once. If you're interested in this idea, you really can dip in a toe. So you can take some portion of your course, some key ideas, some key skills that you want students to leave your class with, and apply standards-based grading to just that component of your class. So take that piece, identify what it is specifically that you want them to learn or to do. Craft those as your core learning targets. These are the specific things we're communicating to students that they should be able to do by the end of your course. Then you'll need to decide when and how to assess them. Ideally, you'll have a space in your curriculum for multiple opportunities for students to meet that or those targets. But how you might do that will look different in a lot of different classes. How will those learning targets and students' assessment results on them fit into your grading scheme? So maybe if you're just taking a subset of the course or a set of core skills, maybe that makes up 20% of the grade, 30% of the grade. That way you can fit this into an existing points-based grading system and still maintain other existing assessments. And then finally, how and how many times will they be reassessed? There's a lot of ways for this to look in and out of class, synchronous, asynchronous. What does it mean for students to meet the targets, and how can they show it throughout the semester? So it's not a one time and you're done. Next slide. Okay, so here's the active, I'm going to say the active learning part of this class, though this webinar has had a number of interactive components. But we want to give you a chance to get started in a small way and thinking about one class that you teach and how you might start implementing standards-based grading. So think about a class, one that you're teaching or one that you'll be teaching in the future, and choose one topic or skill that you value highly. So you can think about it as this line, if you learn nothing else from my class, I hope that you learn blah. That's going to be a core learning outcome or a core learning target for your class. And we want you to try and craft that as a I can statement, this kind of student-centered, student-friendly statement, something that you want students at the end of the course to be able to say, I can do this. And we want you to be as specific as possible, because these standards or these outcomes or these targets are communicating to students what you expect of them. So when they come to the quiz or they're working on their paper or their project, it's clear to them what it means to meet the standard, what bar they're going to need to overcome. So here's an example learning target for an algebra class. I can write the equation of a line giving adequate information. So I'm going to give you about 3 minutes to do that on your own. We're going to move to breakout rooms in a few slides to have a chance to talk about this, but this will just be individual. So take 3 minutes to write a standard, an outcome, a target for one of your classes. Oh, that's cool. I've never used that timer feature before. I'm going to use that all the time when I teach online. All right, so that's the 3 minutes. Hopefully you have a learning target for a course you teach or the beginnings of a learning target. So let's go to the next slide. What we'll do next is write an assessment or draft an assessment that would assess that learning target. So you've identified the skill that you want students to demonstrate. Whatever you write, whether it's a quiz question, essay prompt, a project, a portion of a project, whatever you ask them to do should require students to demonstrate that skill or those skills. And so you want to be explicit about what it is. Perhaps not today in the next 3 minutes, but when you're communicating to students, what is it that you expect? So with our example learning target, I can write the equation of a line given adequate information. An example test question might be, given 2 points, show all the necessary steps to answer the following questions. Calculate the slope of the line joining the points. What is the y-intercept of the line? Write the equation of the line. So a few things you'll notice in there: show all the necessary steps. So you're communicating that it's necessary to show your work in order to demonstrate that you've met the learning target. And this one breaks down the parts about showing the slope, showing the y-intercept, writing the equation of the line. So for this instructor, it's clear that they want you to be able to identify the key parts of the equation of the line as well as the equation, not just give the formula at the end. So again, we'll take about 3 minutes. Maybe that's not going to be enough of time, depending on the learning target that you've written, but it should give us time to get started. Take 3 minutes to draft an assessment. What's one way that you could assess your learning target? All right. So hopefully you were able to get started on writing that assessment. I see I know we're mostly saving questions for the end, but I see a question from Mark in the chat that I want to address with this, because he asked about whether you feel you would need to give all 3 parts of this prompt. And I think if this was my learning target, then I probably wouldn't give all 3 parts. I would just give the last part. But if my learning target was I can identify the slope, y-intercept, and equation of a line, then I would ask all 3 parts. All right, next slide. Okay, now we've got our learning target. We've got our something that we can assess that learning target with. Now the question is, how are you actually going to assess it? What you wrote, is that going to be part of a homework assignment, an essay, a quiz, exam, project, video, you name it? How are students going to engage with that prompt? How are you going to grade it? So as you saw earlier with the Hartnell model, they have a check minus and a not met or a not yet model, where that middle level can be revised to meet the standard. Other people, so at CSUMB in our calculus class, we just use met and not met. So we don't have a revise option, but there are any sorts of scales that you could use to communicate to students where they stand and what counts as meeting the standard. And then, how are you going to provide opportunities for reassessment? So the idea is definitely that we are not one and done on the learning target that you identified. So we want students to have a lot of opportunities, including late in the semester, ideally, to show that they have eventually learned something, eventually met the target. And so how will you do that? So will it be during class time, embedded within your existing assessments? Will you do it during office hours or in a testing center, perhaps? Are there asynchronous ways to reassess? What is going to be the most equitable approach that also is feasible for you? And that's going to really depend on your course, your population, and your needs. So here's where I want to give us a chance to break out into breakout rooms. We're going to put 2 links in the chat. The first link here is a link to this slide, just this slide, since I know when we go to breakout rooms, you won't be able to see the slide anymore. And Jennifer's going to put a Google Doc in where you can record what you've been working on so far. What is the learning target you came up with, for example? But we're going to give you, let's see, checking the clock. I'm going to give you about 10 minutes in breakout rooms. So I'm going to go ahead and open the breakout rooms.
And you
Before
want
I-
them to click on both links, right? Before we go.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. Click on both links.
Okay.
Not just Leti, but everybody. Click on both links. I think it actually stays in the chat, maybe when we go to breakout rooms.
I don't think it does.
No, okay.
Yeah, so
We're
make
gonna
sure you
find
click on
out.
the link before you go to the breakout room.
Please click on the links before you go to the breakout rooms, but you can go ahead and go now.
So it looks like there are 4 breakout rooms. We could monitor them, well, not monitor, but pop in and and see how they're doing and offer. It's funny, room 1 has 5 people and then,
Well, they all had 4 or 5, but then people left.
oh, they didn't want to go to the breakout room.
The light of the chat rooms, of the Zoom room, the breakout room. Okay, so then should we just jump in to one of them?
Sure.
I would give them a
Okay.
little while
Oh,
to,
yeah.
Okay,
to discuss amongst themselves maybe first, and then
okay,
maybe give them, I don't know, 2 minutes and then go.
okay.
Yeah, I do love that timer feature, Allison.
I didn't know it was gonna make sounds. It's great.
I know.
I'm totally gonna use that in my online classes.
Yeah.
Another thing I picked up from Escala.
It's great.
I'm over
Um,
here suffering with the timer.
Nice.
I know, I was just pulling out my phone.
Well,
next to
and
me.
that's when I realized, shoot, I should have been doing this for Letty, and then I did it for Allie. I was like, okay, I can do here.
I thought you were going to, but I wasn't sure if you were. So I was like, well, let me just, since I had the timer going, like, since I started, and I was like,
Mhm.
oh, I'm just gonna eyeball it, like, I mean, kind of like when I, but yeah, it's fine. I mean, it worked out.
So Mark seems to be really engaged. So perhaps
Good.
we should join another room, not Mark's room. They're
Well, there
probably
are
doing fine.
Four,
There's
there are 4
four.
rooms and 4 of us. I figured we'd just split them up.
Oh, okay, sure. Are we sure we want to leave the main room empty though?
Oh, maybe not.
I'll stay in the main room.
Letty.
Yeah, my
then-
will
Yes,
be
I'll
here
stay.
So
too.
Letty stays, and then we should go to room 2, 3, and 4.
Okay.
I have a conflict of interest with room 1.
Okay, so I'll go to room 4, I guess.
I'll go to room 2.
Go to room 3.
All right. And copy the link just in case they don't have it.
Good thinking.
What was what was the other link that you put in the chat, Leti?
I didn't put
Oh.
any links in the chat.
And Jennifer, it looks like maybe that document doesn't have edit access.
Oh, no, hold on. Okay.
I'll broadcast a message once you update it.
Why can I not change it? Oh, there we go. Editor. Okay, now
Mhm.
now they do.
Great.
Okay.
And what is it called? Just learning standards.
Well, it's 4 pages
Yeah.
of learning standards.
Yeah. I
assessments.
just put a title to the. the.
Oh, okay. All right. I just made it on the fly. I was like, we should collect their
Go. Okay, we should go pop in. Yeah.
all right, I'm gonna
I
pop
should-
into 2.
Okay. So when you go pop in, what do you tell them? Like, what are you gonna ask them about what's going on?
I'm not gonna say anything. I'm just gonna listen, unless they have questions.
Thank you. Good feedback. All right. Because once you're out, you can't go back in, huh? I was gonna go visit for a few seconds and nope, I can't go back in. No, once you've been warned, yeah.
No take backs. All right, welcome back, everyone. I'm gonna have wait for Nina to reshare the slides in a moment. Hope you had some good conversations in there. I know the room that I was in was having some great conversations, and I know that this is absolutely just a starting point for folks. It's a lot of information, a lot to think about. Fortunately, there are some other opportunities that we'll talk about for next steps if you want to dig more into this. But for now, I want to go on to the next slide. So you've got your learning targets, you know how you're thinking about how to assess them, how that assessment schema will work. And then finally, you're going to need to incorporate that standard or standards into your syllabus. So how do you assign value to that? And by value here, we really mean a grade in a sense. So we want it to correspond to students' outcomes in the class. And we've got students have that external motivator of the letter grade that they earn in the course. And there are lots of ways to translate the standards into that final letter grade. Some things to consider are all those standards equal? Are you comfortable saying if students just meet X out of Y standards, that's an A? Or are some going to be core to your course that really, to pass the class, they need to meet this set? And will all of them be assessed in the same way? I know when in my calculus class, all the standards are assessed in the same way, but in my differential equations class, they're not. I have some that are assessed via exams and some via projects because they feel qualitatively different to me. And so they don't have to all be assessed in the same way. And now if you're taking this as part of a points-based grading scheme, like a mini standards-based grading within points-based, how many points will you allot to your standards and meeting those standards? So this example here, Barb decided to use 3 of her course student learning outcomes as her core standards. And so they're each 5% of the grades for a total of 15%. So these show up on exams. And she uses the performance on his exams as a met or not met. So 5% or 0% for each of those standards. All right. Finally, so now we've gone through all the steps of really setting this up. I just want to share before we conclude a little bit of data of what we've seen so far. So just a really brief snapshot. Haven't included any charts or anything in here because I knew we would have about 0 minutes to dedicate to this. But let me give you the big picture look at what we've seen on the next slide. So we started using standards-based grading in Calculus 1, both at CSUMB and Hartnell in spring 2022. So we've got a lot of sections at CSUMB because we're coordinated. So all instructors of Calculus 1 are using standards-based grading. In Hartnell, it's an instructor by instructor decision, so it's a smaller number, but when we look at the data all together, we can get some reliable findings. And some of the big things that we're seeing so far is students are earning higher grades, for sure. And a lot of that has to do, we think, with the clarity of the standards and those opportunities to reassess that they're not being kind of thrown out by the first exam. You know, if they don't succeed early in the course in a traditional points-based grading class, they kind of have a hard time earning a passing grade. Whereas in this model, they really have a chance to continue learning and growing. We've seen some reduction in the success gaps between groups, but the results have been mixed. It's really variable by semester and by student group, by class. Right now, we're trying to understand better. One thing that we've noticed is that underrepresented groups, so first generation college students and underrepresented minority groups tend to be slower to meet some of the learning targets in terms of actually attempting them. So some of those privileged groups are able to take advantage of the system early on, make sense of the system early on. So this is really, we see it as more of a communication issue than really a problem with the assessment model, but an important communication issue that we're still trying to address. Next slide. I'm going to actually skip over these. We're going to share the slides afterwards, just because I do want to get to the last couple slides here. Yeah. This is about the rates at which students are re-attempting learning targets. Next slide. I wanted to get to our takeaways. So we started with talking about active learning today. And we as a team really believe that active learning is a strong framework upon which to build your alternative grading system. Both of these ideas, the standards-based grading and the active learning, are about student ownership and student growth of their learning. And we think they just go together so, so well. Metacognitive activities really help to lay the foundation on which the whole structure is built. It's essential that students understand the system and what it is they need to do to be successful. So early in the semester, we engage students in activities that help them understand what it is to meet a standard. You know, how do you track your progress? How do you interpret that information? And we definitely think that that's important. Support for students, also essential. So having students work in teams, having the support of classmates to learn and to continue progressing both within the class and across the educational system. Faculty, we also need support. This is really hard to do by yourself. It's not to say you can't do it by yourself. Many of us in our first course attempts with this did it by ourselves, but through this grant, we've found so much value in having people to talk to about it, even if it's not the same course, just to brainstorm and troubleshoot issues that come up. And finally, there are a lot of varieties of this. So we talked about the specifics at Hartnell College here, but you can do what you want with this. There are a lot of different options. And the key is to find out what works for you and your course. Next slide. Okay, I said there are going to be some more opportunities, and Myra's going to share some that are being offered by the California Acceleration Project. We at CSUMB and Hartnell are offering a workshop series that's a 5 series. It starts next Friday, but that one's going to be pretty similar to this one, a little bit more interaction. And then every 2 to 3 weeks after that. And you're the audience. You're here, you're interested in possibly adopting standards-based grading for a course you teach. I put on here that stipends are available for the first 4 people who sign up. There are a lot more than 4 people here. So, but if you sign up quickly, there is a little bit of money to support your participation, but otherwise it's free. Come join us starting next Friday. I'll leave this slide up for a minute, but again, we'll have the slides available.
There was a
Howdy.
question that I wanted to address with the whole group here also while people get a chance to think about this.
Yeah.
I think someone asked, and I don't remember the name, but how do you do this in with a class of 400 students? You know, and I thought about that and I was like, well, I guess I would I asked how would you do it? How do you do it now, right? And because really, I don't think there is a huge change. You do have to reassess. So, but the grading is so much faster because it's either a P or an N. And so you do need to be prepared in advance with like a library of versions of assessments, perhaps that you can use as reassessments so that you don't have to, be struggling to make them up at that moment. But perhaps the most cautious thing I would suggest is don't try to do it all at once. Maybe just pick a chapter, or pick 3 learning outcomes just to, take it for a pilot in your course.
Absolutely. Thanks, Nina. All right, why don't we go to just show the next couple slides. These aren't going to be things you have links to until you have the slides. But we've provided some additional examples and repositories, links to repositories for math and physics course materials that other folks have used. And then on the next slide, we've got a lot of stuff we've developed for calculus from our implementations at Hartnell College and CSUMB that we have also shared, we've made public. And so please take our materials, adapt them as you see fit for your course. We even have quiz problems, exam problems available. We're not going to post those on the internet because we're still using those with our students. But we would be happy to share those. Oh, and there Nina's last link is the slides. So that has all of our links. Okay, so let me stop here and we can take your questions.
And Myra also linked to the folder that we shared at the grading conference, and those are available on the CAP website.
I really want to encourage folks to look through that folder. A lot of times I attend a webinar and I really want to get a bigger picture of what the whole thing looks like and examples if I drill down into each piece of it. And that folder of resources had everything in it. How do you talk to students about this on the first day? Things that you need to think about as an instructor going into your class for the first time when you're using this. Examples of every part of the process that Allie talked about. So, and they even shared their Canvas shells. Jennifer and Allie, I think, shared their entire Canvas course. So you could sort of get a sense of how these things flowed. So I really encourage, I mean, that was just such an act of generosity. So I hope that folks will take advantage of it and look at it. I thought it was an amazing wealth of helpful information. The California Acceleration Project has we're sort of focusing on grading and assessment from different perspectives. We have several more webinars focused on those topics. You can go to our events page at accelerationproject.org to register. And then take advantage, of course. And Allie, I will just offer to help your group advertise that opportunity if you would like me to. I'd be glad to use our very large listserv to get the word out on that. And then we also, CAP is offering at Mount SAC on January 31st, an in-person one day on Saturday, come together with your colleagues and really work through your ideas on standards-based grading in conversation with others. So that is also, you can sign up for that event. And it's a limited space because we are providing food and all of that. So, get in now for that event. You can sign up on our events page. So I'm not seeing any other questions at this time. So I want to thank our presenters today, not only for the work that you've done and this webinar, but your continued contributions to supporting your colleagues and moving toward this very powerful, I'll just say it this way. I don't know if, I think from your opening, you would agree that so much of what community college faculty are now dealing with and teaching calculus under AB 1705, there's this sort of dual things between being concerned about rigor and maintaining rigor in a course, but also being concerned about equity, which I think is what the placement and changing the types of support we offer, what that is about equity. And I think the places where these two things meet is in standards-based grading, right? So this is really, I think, a powerful lever for conversations within your department when there are these sort of dueling concerns, to bring them together into just, a better pedagogy, better practice, better classrooms where students feel that they are learning and that the instructor cares about their learning. All right, with that said, thank you so much, everyone. And Please check out the list of our webinars and take advantage of this group's opportunity for our standards-based grading workshops. Happy Friday.